Hey, I'm Pastor Billy Flowers from Macon, Houston Road Church right here in Macon, Georgia. And with me is Bo Korink, a good friend of mine. He is also a great member of our church, but he has an amazing story of God's healing that he wants to share with you all today. So, Bo, go ahead and tell them your story.
Thank you. Back in July of 2021, not long after the state convention, I developed COVID. In 4 days, I ended up in the hospital in Byron. 4 hours after that, I was in a coma. A couple of days after, I woke up one time to see my pastor, my family outside the window, and he wrote on the window, "Live." All I could remember was saying, "I love y'all." Fell back into a coma. The next day, my understanding was that they told my son that they'd have to airlift me to Tampa, Florida. Next day, they couldn't get the helicopter off the ground because of the weather. So they called for an ambulance, said they'd have to travel in an ambulance. Ambulance got a flat tire on the way to the hospital.
Wow.
So, kind of strange. They ended up calling for another air flight out of South Carolina. Later that afternoon, I was able to be air flighted, loaded, and down to Tampa, Florida. When I got to Florida, they got to the hospital, they called my son, told him that I was bad. They'd do their best to keep me alive. Naturally, they went down. I had no idea what was going on. With all that going on, they put me on a ventilator. I stayed on a ventilator for 16 weeks. I was in a coma for 8 weeks. During that 8-week time, twice they told my sons that I would have no quality of life. My lungs would have to be replaced. They were ruined. My kidneys would have to be replaced. They were ruined. And by the end of the 8 weeks, I had no brain function. So, many prayers of this church and many family members. On the 17th of September, 18th, my son was headed down to Florida, him and his new wife. I missed the wedding. They called him and said that the doctor needed to speak to him as soon as I got there. And that time when he got there, he said he knew what was going on. The doctor took him in a room. He said he has no quality of life, no brain function. It's time to make the decision to pull the plug. At that moment, I flatlined. He freaked out. They pushed him out of the way. They finally got my heart started back, but nothing worked. They couldn't understand why I had no brain function, but everything else was messed up. So they told him and his wife they could stay in the room for that night. My son, being a believer, stood there and touched me, and he said, "God, I don't want to be the one to kill my dad, but you got to give me a sign. He can't live like this, and I don't want him to." They left, went back to the motel room. Next morning when he come there, I turned my head, looked at him, and said, "Hey, kids, how y'all doing?"
Can you open your eyes wide for me, Dad? Open them wide.
Open them real wide. There you go. Raise your eyebrows.
Raise your eyebrows. There it is.
Amen.
The power of prayer stood in place. God touched me. My lungs function fine. My kidneys are 100%, and I'm doing everything they said I couldn't do. I'm not perfect. Still got some delays and some things coming back to work. But I came to church a year later, less than a year later, taught my Sunday school class. I'm up walking, and I'm living life again. The power of prayer, I'm a walking testimony.
You've got to be kidding me.
Come on up in here, boy.
Ain't God good?
Dude,
Yeah, God's good. Look at him. Oh,
you
there you
have
go.
got to be kidding me.
I was glad when they said to me, "Let us come into the house of the Lord."
Wow.
There's much more to this that Pastor Billy could probably tell you. I slept through most of it. But that being said, I am a true walking miracle. If you don't believe in prayer and what God can do, talk to me and talk to many people that's been around me.
You know, Bo, I remember when we were down there at the hospital with you, and they told us, they called us in. They said, "He's not going to make it. We're going to call all the family." And I remember that phone call from Justin where he said, Pastor Billy, y'all might want to get down here. Actually, he said, we want you to pray. And I said, well, we're on the way. And we got up. We were at a restaurant. We left. We headed down. And I kept saying, Lord, you said he would live. And we began to pray and believe that word again. And when we got there and we got to see you the next day, you were talking and you looked at me, and the first words out of your mouth were, I want to go swimming. And I said, well, brother, let's go. Get up out of that bed. I'll take you to Tampa. We're right here at Tampa Bay. We'll go swimming in the bay right now. And we laughed and we rejoiced. But, Bo, I remember every step of the journey while you were unconscious. I remember your son calling us each week. There was something else. They would say, his brain activity is not there. It's gone. And we in church at Houston Road Church would decree that Sunday morning that your brain function would come back, and the next day it was back. The next week your kidneys were failing. You were not going to make it. Your kidneys, your organs were shutting down. We began to decree your kidneys to be healed. And God healed your kidneys to the point where they are healthier than a man in his 20s. I mean, that's God doing that. And then your lungs. They said your lungs wouldn't make it, that they were so damaged from COVID and everything. And we began to declare on that Sunday morning, God not heal his lungs, but give him new lungs. And Rip Kinley shared that word. He believed in that word. We began to pray for your healing, and he stood up and said, we're going to believe for new lungs. And God totally restored your breathing. Guys, this is a miracle. So, Bo, I want you to end this with just an encouraging word for those people at the convention, and share with them your heart about how faithful your God is.
Never give up. Never think that God doesn't show up in your situation.
Amen.
It may not happen at that moment,
Amen.
but God is faithful. I'm a true example of that. You know, we all go through struggles and trials. But if we leave it in God's hands, we take our hands off of it.
That's right.
Remember, the doctor said there was no hope for me 3 times. And the last time, my son was standing there when I flatlined. And here I am. No, it's not perfect, but I'm still here. I'm be able to give my testimony. Never forget what God can do. Never allow the enemy to coerce you into believing that there's not a God. I'm an example of a true, loving God.
Amen. God bless you. Thank you for sharing your story, and we hope this has been a ministering moment for those at the state convention. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank y'all.